everybody. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you're not new to the channel, welcome back. Today on Pacific Pines Ranch, I'm gonna go over the best cutting tools for a shipping container build. And I'm also gonna go over the pros and cons of each tool. And I'm gonna be doing a little demonstration of using each tool on one of the leftover panels that we have from our build and show you guys what the cuts look like. So before I cut anything, I am going to gear up. So definitely gonna put on all my safety gear and go from there. That's better. Alrighty, so here we have all the tools that we use out on the ranch to cut the container, or really any kind of steel. From here to here, we have a couple different versions of angle grinders. Here to here, we have reciprocating saw, and here we have plasma cutter. So I'm gonna start with the angle grinder because this is the tool that we use most often and is the most versatile, I would say. So you have the 4.5 inch angle grinder. This is also a 4.5 inch angle grinder, 7 inch angle grinder, and 9 inch angle grinder. You can adapt each one of these to have different tools on the end. So this one we have a cutting disc on the end, but you can also put a wire cup, a resin sanding disc. We use these a lot on the ranch. A wire wheel. So that's great, interchangeable parts. Also, another thing to note is they do offer these as battery tools and corded tools. Although I will mention the battery tools don't last that long because it does ask a lot of power. So if you're gonna be cutting a lot, I would recommend to go with a corded tool or have like 50 batteries on hand. These ones are great for when you need to reach farther or cut larger pieces of steel. And yeah, that's about it for the angle grinders. Now for the reciprocating saw. These ones are also offered as a battery tool or a corded tool. You can put different sized blades on the end. I know this one's a 6 inch one, but I've seen they have like 7, 8, 9 inches. And also the blades depend on what application you're using them for. So we have metal here because we're cut metal most often, but you can get wood saws, you can get plastic saws, just depends on what you're using it for. Something that's cool about these is you can change the orientation of the blade. So if you want it to be straight, if you want it to go to the side, if you want it to go to the other side, it's a neat little feature that they have. And lastly, the plasma cutter. There's quite a few different machines that you can buy. They range between like 30 amps to 50 amps, and maybe there's some that do more than that for more serious fabrication work. One thing to note about this machine is it does require some pretty intense electricity, and you do need to use compressed air with it. So you need an air compressor. A lot of the machines offer different kind of disposables that go into this gun right here that can change the size of the cut depending on what disposables you use and what settings you use. So that's cool to know. So that's a little explanation of all the tools that we have right here, a little bit of how they work, what they do. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over here to this nice little panel that we cut out of one of the containers. And I am going to go one by one and use each tool and cut out these shapes. So right here we have a straight line, here we have the end of our right angle, and here we have a curved shape. So we'll show you guys how they work for each one. And then after that, I'm gonna go over the pros and cons of each tool. So here we go. right, so did the first cuts here, straight cuts. As you can see, the angle grinder and the reciprocating saw did really clean cuts. Plasma cutter, a little bit jagged. Also, I'm somewhat of a beginner with the plasma cutter, so if you have like years of experience, your cuts probably look way better than mine, so keep that in mind. Little side note. All right, so got that one done. Now we're gonna do this one. Alrighty, so we got all of the cuts made, and now I will do a little comparison between all of them. So here we have the straight cuts, here we have these little triangles, and here we have a little bit of a straight and then a round cut. So now I'm going to go over the pros and cons of each tool. So here are the pros and cons of the angle grinder. And this is kind of universal between any angle grinder. It doesn't really make a difference of the size. So the pros. These are easy to find at pretty much any hardware store. And if you live in a remote location, that is sort of important because you don't want to be traveling hours and hours to get one tool. They're easy to learn how to use. When I started this project, I had zero building experience, so I had to learn how to use all of these tools, and this one was pretty straightforward and user-friendly. This tool makes very precise and clean cuts. As you can see from our little experiment earlier, they are very straight and very clean. Now, the cons. These tools make a lot of dust and debris when you use them. If you're just cutting something small, that doesn't make a big difference. But if you're cutting like very large areas and a lot of steel, it does accumulate and create sort of like this very fine metal dust that can get on other stuff. And if you live in a corrosive area, that can cause surface rust on other items. Now, for the reciprocating saw, here are the pros. Again, easy to find at pretty much any hardware store. It's a common tool, and also easy to learn how to use. Pretty straightforward. Just pull the trigger and cut. One advantage that these have over the angle grinder is their ability to fit into small or hard to reach spaces where the angle grinder cannot due to the round shape. And lastly, there is minimal debris when you use this for cutting. Now, for the cons. As you can see in the video that we just did, this thing vibrates so much. It will vibrate your arm off, it will vibrate stuff off the table, and it is a little bit hard to keep straight due to the vibrations. And lastly, the plasma cutter. First, let's go over the pros. This tool requires the least amount of physical effort by far. It's super easy. Literally, this just cuts through steel like butter. Another pro is that you can cut any sort of shape. You can cut letters, you can cut numbers, you can cut animals, whatever that you want. You just pretty much just draw whatever that you want to cut and follow the stencil. Also, another thing to note is this has minimal debris when using it as a cutting tool. Now for the cons. This machine requires strong electricity, so you need to have anywhere between a 30 to 50 amp service, maybe more if you have a larger machine. This one's kind of like a entry-level plasma cutter. Also, this machine does have a little bit of a learning curve. As you can see with the experiment that we just did, I am by no means an expert with this. It's easier to make a straight cut when you have a guide, but it does take a little bit of practice to kind of get used to it and try to keep your hand as still as possible. Another con to this machine is that it's way more expensive than the other tools that I talked about previously. And lastly, it will probably be more difficult to find in remote locations. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, the best cutting tools for container build, the pros and cons of each cutting tool, and our little experiment that we did with each tool. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time.